Major funding for Frontline is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding is provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide.
Tonight on Frontline, a look at a troubled land, El Salvador.
We're certainly doing better than Salvador has done over the past 50 years.
Free elections are now underway, but the only choice is the right wing. And will it really be the United States who decides the outcome?
The election is good insofar as the results are the ones wanted by the U.S. present administration.
The Reagan administration spends millions fighting communism here. Is it a captive in El Salvador?
From the network of public television stations, a presentation of KCTS Seattle, WNET New York, WPBT Miami, WTVS Detroit, and WGBH Boston. This is Frontline.
Good evening. I'm Judy Woodruff. El Salvador is in the midst of national elections. The country is also at war. A leftist guerrilla movement has chosen violence as the way to bring about a revolution there. El Salvador has also become the testing ground for U.S. policy in Central America. The stakes are seen to be high. Earlier this year, the Kissinger Commission called the guerrilla movement a direct threat to U.S. security interests. It recommended dramatic increases in military and economic aid. That's what the Reagan administration wants from Congress: more money for aid and more arms to fight communism. But at the same time, we want El Salvador to move towards democracy. This winter, Frontline sent producer Ofra Bikel to El Salvador. Bikel is a distinguished filmmaker. Born in Israel, educated in Paris, she has lived in the United States since 1960. She has made films around the world. Her latest films are joined by a common theme: the meaning of democracy. In El Salvador, she says, she did not try to deal with the Salvadoran left and its political solution or with military strategy. Rather, she has tried to come to grips with the impact of U.S. policy and our concept of democracy on the lives of the people of El Salvador. She calls her film essay Captive in El Salvador.
¡Revolución, muerte! ¡Venceremos! ¡Unidos para combatir! ¡Hasta la victoria final! ¡Viva la Revolución Cubana! ¡Que viva!
Long live the Cuban Revolution, they shout.
¡Venceremos!
This is not Cuba. This is El Salvador. And this is jail. They sing of death and victory, of the glory of the revolution. Political prisoners and their relatives stage a Marxist rally in the jail of one of the most right-wing countries of Central America.
La bandera roja y blanca nos protegerá, y una estrella el sendero nos señalará. Para mundo Martí viene rompiendo caminos libertarios, por donde transitará la justicia y la paz de nuestro pueblo.
They call for peace, justice, and liberty. It's what everybody wants for El Salvador.
Nos hemos decidido por el camino de la democracia.
Democracy and liberty. It's election time in El Salvador.
Que primero El Salvador, segundo El Salvador y tercero El Salvador.
Y este día, con orgullo, lo nomina candidato a la presidencia de la República.
El Salvador, where we came not to search for war, but to look at life. To see the people whose lives have somehow become intertwined with ours, for better or for worse. This is a country whose very existence depends on us, on the United States. And so we came to see what it is that they do for themselves and what it is that we are doing for them. And when the war, which will help them fight, is won, what kind of a world will we have saved for their children? Colonel Lopez Nuila, the chief of police, is known as one of the country's strongmen, but he was friendly and gave us good advice.
Siempre yo les he recomendado, precisamente ha sido la única recomendación que yo les he hecho.
I make one recommendation. If you want to capture the reality of this country, don't talk to government officials or to organized groups. Talk to the people. This is where you'll find the truth.
Sino que hablen con el pueblo, que es donde está la verdad.
Hi, how are you? What do you think of your government? ¿Qué piensa usted de su gobierno?
Ay, mi gobierno.
Better not to think about it at all. We can't say very much.
Del gobierno.
The government?
Qué difícil la prueba.
What a difficult question. What do you think of your government?
Sin comentarios.
No comment.
No comments. Thank you.
Bueno, mi esposo, él es suizo.
Her husband is Swiss, so she can't give her opinion. He is from Costa Rica, so he can't give his opinion. He is religious, so he can't give his opinion. These things are very delicate, you understand. Another time, maybe. The police chief's advice wasn't working. People in the streets of the capital, San Salvador, are friendly, but they don't talk openly to strangers. The truth he wanted us to find was elusive. It's unlikely he would have wanted us to meet Corina. We met her in the small legal aid office of the Catholic Archdiocese of San Salvador. Her story was simple. Her husband had not come home for 2 nights. When did he disappear? Tell me exactly what happened. He left on Wednesday at 9 in the morning to go to work. Her husband was a well-known artist, director of a puppet theater. He also taught art in high school. That day, he left home and didn't return. Were you worried? Yes, he's always come home to sleep. What makes you think your husband has been captured? I'm not sure, says Corina. The chief of police had an explanation. There are people who disappear suddenly from their homes. No one knows where they are. Then they reappear in Cuba or in Russia or Nicaragua studying. But it seemed unlikely that Corina's husband had gone off to study. She came home to their house in the middle-class neighborhood of San Salvador to find it broken into. The neighbors said that the army had broken in and searched for 3 hours. She was panic-stricken. She called us. She wanted to pack some of her things and leave, but she was scared. She asked if we would come as some sort of protection. So we came. And we watched Corina in an hour and a half pack up the pieces of her family life. There was no time to think or choose. Her husband's puppets were first. Then his portrait. A few dishes, the refrigerator, some children's clothes, some books, Her husband's suit, a toy. Once she left the house, she would never return. Her whereabouts would be kept secret. It would be 2 weeks before we heard from her.
La patria está de fiesta.
The motherland is celebrating.
Es una realidad.
Freedom is now a reality. Presidential elections are taking place in El Salvador. Whatever Americans may think, Salvadorians know quite a lot about elections. They've had them there for most of this century. Elections that never had very much to do with the will of the people. In fact, it is through elections that one can trace the roots of the civil war in this country. Elections which everyone knew were fraudulent and which drove part of the population in the 70s to abandon the democratic process and take up arms. It is all supposed to be different now. These are our elections. The second US-sponsored elections in 2 years. In 1982, El Salvador elected a constituent assembly which wrote into law all the US-inspired ideals. Individual freedom, human rights, justice, land reform, and now the law of the land. The US was pleased. Ambassador Thomas Pickering.
I would say that we're certainly doing better than Salvador has done over the past 50 years, and perhaps better than it's done in the last 4 years. The fact is that political parties in this country, which didn't exist in any real way as political parties, are now sitting down. They've approved an extensive constitution. They've negotiated out tough issues. They've reached compromises, which is the essence of politics in any democracy. Agreement on land reform, a very important issue, one I think that too few of the American people know about.
Agrarian reform is the cornerstone of US policy in El Salvador. The land is what it has all been about. For generations, 80% of the land belonged to 10% of the people, who through the land controlled the country. They were the agrarian oligarchy. The other 90% of the farmers were landless or had tiny plots of land from which they could barely eke out a living. In this coffee-dominated economy, the land reform, inspired and pushed by the US, was meant to help the small farmer, to give him a chance to live, so that he would not be swayed by foreign revolutions. It was farmers like these the US remembered, who welcomed Castro in Cuba. And so in the first phase of the ambitious land reform, large estates were turned over to peasant cooperatives under the supervision of a government agency, ISTA. Don Raúl Salaverría has been one of the casualties of the US policy in El Salvador. He is the oligarch, one of the most powerful landowners in the country, who lost land to the agrarian reform program. His expropriated farm now belongs to a cooperative of about 1,000 farmers who used to work for him. For generations, this has been a dream. Now they've been on their own for 4 years. They have their own elected board of directors, which pays them according to the work they do.
Marta Lico.
They don't own the land yet, but they should be able to buy it later on with their profits. But they haven't been doing very well, and the pay is meager.
Teodora Catalán.
$8 to $10 for 15 days' work at the height of the season. Soon, there will be no more work and no more money.
Ahorita estamos un poquito menos que antes, porque Don Raúl
now we are less well off than before, because Don Raúl used to help us, and now we're not so well off. Isn't it better, though, I asked, to have your own piece of land? Ah, no, she says, no. That, no. Why? Because we don't know. We don't have the wherewithal. What good is it to have a piece of land if you don't have the money to work it with? Do you have enough to eat? No, it's not enough.
No, aquí no sé, no hay trabajo, pues. Aquí lo
There's
que
no
no
work
necesita es
here.
el trabajo.
We are completely broke. We are suffering. We don't have work. It's difficult now. No one gives you anything. The government, ISTA? Nothing. Credit? Nothing.
Yo cuando estaba con mi patrón estaba feliz.
When I was with my landlord, I was happy because everything I wanted, I had. And today, no. What is the situation today?
¿Cuál es la situación ahora, dice?
Que favorismo no lo hallo.
Without him, I don't like it.
No.
They all gathered to welcome Don Raul when he arrived in his bulletproof car at the house he still owns on the expropriated farm. There is little doubt that he is still the landlord.
Señoras, pido un aplauso para don Raúl Lanadilla.
What's gone wrong here? Why have they done so badly without him? The answer can be found here, in a shabby little union hall. These people are members of a peasant organization, trained by the AFL-CIO and sponsored by the US government in an effort to head off communism in the countryside. Their task is to help peasant farmers to make a success of the government's agrarian reform.
La asistencia de la cooperativa. Y ellas puedan sentirse más superior que...
But the field workers returned from the cooperatives with reports of how the government itself undermines the very reform it had pledged to carry out. There is the problem of credit. When the cooperative farmers apply for credit for seeds, for example, which they must have before the rainy season, the government banks hold up the papers. So when the money comes, if it comes, it arrives too late. The rainy season is over, the soil is dry, and the year's crop is lost. Whatever they do produce, they have a problem marketing. The cooperative must sell their product to the government at a fixed price. The government sells it at a profit. But the profit, she says, does not go back to the cooperative. So there is no way the farmers can make money. There's also the problem of access. The farmers are not allowed to talk to the very people who are supposed to help them.
Yo vengo de parte de la Unión Comunal Salvadoreña.
I'm here on behalf of the Salvadorian Peasant Organization. I would like to offer you our services, which we give to cooperatives. The farmers look unhappy. We know that your services are very good, and we'd like to have them, right? But we have been strictly forbidden to associate with you.
¿Quién es el que les impone la prohibición?
Who has issued this prohibition? It's ISTA, the government. Only a few weeks before, 9 bodies were found a few miles from here, bodies of farmers who had attended this union meeting. So the new cooperatives, isolated and undercut by the government, have no one to turn to. Some turn to the old landlord. We are here on behalf of the farmers. We are poor. We are not happy with the agrarian reform. We are fighting to have the land returned to you so we can work for you the way we used to. Don Raul is gracious. I know that all the farmers want the land to be returned to me. This could possibly be achieved if you people keep on the pressure. So they press as best they can. They make speeches when there are visitors around. They talk about the good old days when there was work and when there was no need to worry about credit.
Ahora cuando era de don Raúl, porque él no sabíamos nosotros ni de dónde traía.
When it belonged to Don Raúl, we didn't know where he got the money to pay us.
No sabemos si
We didn't care if he had it here or if he brought it from the United States.
él nos pagaba y punto.
He paid us, period.
Semillas, maíz, frijol.
We had corn, beans, coffee, sugar. We had clothes. Our children had toys.
Todo era alegría, ahora es tristeza.
Everything was happiness. Today it's sadness.
Injusto.
It's unjust.
Suplico.
I beg,
Como pobre, como
as a poor man,
como hambriento, puedo decir
as a
así,
hungry
siento,
man,
tengo hambre.
because I'm hungry.
No hay buenas condiciones como las que
That if we can't have better conditions than the ones we've had for the last 4 years, then please,
rogamos.
please give back the land to Don Raúl Salavarria. This is not what the farmers had in mind in all the years they dreamed of land reform. Nor can it possibly be the U.S. vision of how to win the hearts and minds of the people in the war for democracy. The war has been going on for 4 years. It has been written about and publicized in every paper. Its images known to every TV viewer. A war to fight communism in Central America. It is a war the U.S. finances and will go on financing. A war which must be fought not only with arms, but with human effort. It is a war for the hearts and minds of the people of the country. San Vicente province is a famous battleground won by the army. Now it is calm.
Por el momento estamos tranquilos.
For the moment we are calm. The guerrillas never come?
Vienes seguido.
What should they do? They come all the time.
Entran a comprar y salen.
They come to do their shopping and they leave without fear,
Sin miedo,
without the army,
sin ejército, sin nada.
without nothing, he says. But this is the army control zone.
¿Eh?
This was supposed to be the showcase, the example. The example of what U.S. money and Salvadorian might could do. The plan, launched with fanfare, called for the Salvadorian army to drive out the guerrillas, while U.S. aid dollars would revitalize the important region only 30 miles from the capital and bring back its citizens who had fled the fighting. Almost immediately, the operation was pronounced a success. When we arrived 8 months later, the phone lines were down, the city dead. As for the U.S. aid projects, we saw 8 men working while others were watching. There was no sign of the army. They may well laugh.
Ahí los vienen a controlar ellos, a comprar.
The guerrillas are the one in control. They come and go as they wish. Why aren't the guerrillas afraid of the army?
Bueno, porque como ellos no vienen a cada rato.
Well, because the army doesn't come here.
En sus cuarteles, ¿verdad?
They're far away in their headquarters.
Estos pueblitos.
And to visit a small town like ours, I don't think they have enough love for us.
Mucho amor por venir a visitarlos a nosotros, ¿verdad?
The guerrillas must have enough love for this little town, because they come every single day. They walk the streets of Santa Clara with self-assurance. No one seems to worry much about them, except an occasional dog. Life goes on as the guerrillas talk to the people, listening to their problems.
Les dije yo ayer que quería deshacer la trinchera.
Tony's problem was that he had a stone wall he wanted to tear down. He asked the guerrillas permission, explaining that the wall was a safety hazard for his children.
Porque es peligroso para mí y para mis niños.
Why must you ask the guerrillas permission?
Porque como ellos son los que están viniendo acá todos los días.
Because they are the ones who come here every day.
Si estaba bueno o no.
They must say if it's good or not. They said that I could do it. It was all right. Did you ask the army's permission? No. Since they're not here. The guerrillas take their time. They're in no rush. They clown around and they do their shopping. And Tony the shopkeeper and Ricardo the schoolteacher explain.
Hay familia dividida.
There are divided
Hay
families,
primos que están acá y otros
cousins,
que andan en el campo, en la guerrilla.
brothers too.
Hermanos lo mismo.
One in the
Hay
army,
división.
the other with the guerrillas.
Uno en el ejército, el otro en el otro campo, en la guerrilla. Sí hay. Vean.
Nosotros no.
We can't say that what they call communism
Y lo que le llaman comunismo pues es el verdadero camino
is
que
the
debe
true
seguir
road
el
which the
pueblo,
people should follow.
porque
Because
la
the
verdad
truth
es que
is that we
no
know
sabemos
absolutely nothing about communism.
qué es comunismo, ¿verdad?
Whether it's communism or not, the guerrillas make sure their point of view is well presented. They visit, they shake hands, they campaign.
Ellos reúnen a la gente en un pequeño meeting.
They gather the people in small meetings, says Tony, and they explain why they must destroy government buildings.
Lo hacen para que el gobierno emplee los millones de dólares que los Estados Unidos les
They want the
mandan
government to use the millions of dollars that the U.S. sends them for good
En
things.
lugar de comprar armas, dice que compren tractores.
Instead of buying arms, they
cosas
say,
agrícolas.
they should buy tractors. And Tony muses about his torn country.
La solución sería en que ambas partes,
The
digo yo,
solution would be, I
llegaran a
think,
un
that the two
acuerdo,
sides come to an agreement to put an
ponerle
end to
paro
this
ya
violence in which we live.
situación violenta que estamos viviendo.
En las elecciones pues yo no.
As far as
La
the
verdad es
elections
que
go,
de los
the truth is that
están,
of all
yo
the
no puedo
parties,
asegurar cuál de los partidos ya sea
I can't really be sure which party is the best one to govern our
está
people.
bueno para que dirija, para que gobierne nuestro pueblo, ¿verdad?
So what I will do is go to the polling place and vote with my eyes closed.
Dicen a ojos cerrados, ¿verdad? Donde caiga la crucita y la...
And wherever the little mark falls, let it fall.
¡Corte! 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 ¡Corte!
It's election time in El Salvador. It's an election the U.S. wanted and called for. It's a strange democratic election. 4 of the 6 candidates are on the right. 2, by our standards, are moderate or moderate right. It's an election where people are bussed and directed, where voting is obligatory, where all those who represent the left of center are either abroad or fighting or dead. And it's an election further complicated by the fact that the United States disapproves of the leader of one of the parties. The party is Arena, the party of the extreme right. Arena has the best organization, lots of money, and dedicated party workers. It has a good vote-getter, Roberto Dubuisson. But Dubuisson has a problem. Liked as he may be by those around him, his name has been linked to death squads. The US Congress doesn't want him. After the 1982 election, he formed a coalition which would have made him president. Salvadorans believe that the US blocked him. Democratic elections or not, Arena fears it may happen again.
Patria sí, comunismo no. Patria sí, comunismo no. Viva Arena. Viva.
At the home of Hugo Barrera, Dubuisson's running mate, the leading ladies of Arena explain their party's ideas and principles. They're quite clear about the stakes. This is more than an election. It's war, where there can be no compromise. The Christian Democrats are traitors. And Duarte is a communist. The vision of the world is clear-cut. There are two fronts here, communism and anti-communism. It's no right or left. It's anti-communism and communism. And Arena is anti-communist. And there is nothing in between. We don't believe in center. To be in the center is to be nothing. The Jesuit professor Ignacio Martín Baró, one of the only liberals still alive and talking in El Salvador, agrees, if not quite in the way they see it.
As far as I can tell you, I don't think in this country, in El Salvador, we have a political center. We don't have a political center in this country. Let's say that you would have to choose in the United States between somebody like Mr. Reagan, like Mr. Wallace, and like somebody from the John Birch Society. What would you think? Would you have a broad enough spectrum to have a real election? Well, that's what, in fact, we have here. People to the extreme right, to the far right, to the right, and to the maybe a moderate right.
O sea, yo quisiera saber que cuando los Estados Unidos
I'd like to know, when the U.S. say they want a center, what do they mean by center? We are anti-communist and we are fighting to defend our system. We know that this election will be decisive for our system, the system of free enterprise. We won't let communism into our country. And if Arena doesn't win, if Duarte wins, Arena will win. But if not, yes, it will. Well then, we'll soon be a country like Nicaragua. And the US will get the message. They will have to worry about communism. They think back with rage at the elections of 1982.
Bueno, lo que sucedió aquí el 28 de marzo fue un día histórico.
It was a historical day, an example for the whole world. All these thousands of people who voted.
Los Estados Unidos no respetaron
and the US did not respect the will of a whole people.
O sea, ¿para qué votamos entonces?
Why do we vote then?
O sea, ellos nos impusieron una persona.
They imposed on us a president who had nothing to do with anything.
¿Qué es la democracia entonces para ellos?
So what is democracy for them?
Se burlaron.
They mocked us.
Nos abofetearon porque realmente
slapped our face.
Nosotros pensamos que por primera vez.
We really believe that for the first time we'll have free elections here. Professor Martín Baró does not disagree.
No, what I'm saying is that if you accept the outcome of the election at this moment, Delbuisson would be the president of this country. And he is not the president of this country. Why? Because of the pressure of the United States of America. And they put a president who could be acceptable for public world opinion. I think that President Magaña is 1,000 times better than Delbuisson. I prefer him. I think he's a good man. But that's not the point. The point is that he was not elected. So what for to have an election? The election is good insofar as the results are the ones wanted by the US present administration. But if they are not, what? What would happen?
From behind the walls of the US Embassy, these criticisms are met with equanimity.
I believe that Salvadorans have a clear choice. They had that choice in 1982. They voted for the parties who are now in power.
The ambassador chooses his words carefully. They have to hide the fact that the US Embassy and the US people are held captive by policies that are contradictory. El Salvador must look democratic, so that Congress will send more guns to fight communism. So the standard bearer of democracy can applaud the democratic proceedings and praise the Salvadorian spirit. But the decision as to who will govern them will probably not be left to them. Too much is at stake. Of the two leading candidates, Dubuisson, acceptable to the Salvadorian army, may cause Congress to cut off military aid. Duarte, acceptable to the US, has the ultra-right and business dead against him. The army doesn't exactly want him. As for Guerrero, he could get everyone's approval, but he cannot get the vote. So behind the razzle-dazzle of election, which further divides the nation, an agreement will have to be reached between the two power brokers, the US and the Salvadorian army. Whatever the voters say, the reality is that no candidate will enter unless supported by US-supplied guns. And after all the democratic hoopla is over, the power will be where it has always been in El Salvador, in the military. The military behind a civilian face. Monsignor Urioste, assistant to the Archbishop of El Salvador.
We have had elections in this country for 50 years, and we didn't have any solution through these elections. So sometimes I think that never mind if the name of the president is Magaña or is Duarte or is any other name, our experience is that the military are the ones who have the control in this country in every sense.
So after the elections are over, there will be, just as there were before, half a dozen colonels who will rule the Salvadorian nation, for better or for worse.
Intro. The Salvadoran army is ordering some officers linked to death squad activity into diplomatic exile, as Michael Drudge reports.
O'Connor, CBS News, Tejutla, El Salvador.
Salvadorians believe the international press is bent on reporting the worst. It's not necessarily true. Even as they file their daily dispassionate reports from the hotel in San Salvador, it's the stark images of Salvadorian realities, picked out and set to American rock, which capture what they may really feel and what they will share only among themselves.
Dijeron vas, vas barra vaya, vas, qué risa me das, vas, qué loco está ya, vas, agarra el compa ya, vas, 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 llama barra vas. Sonaba el bongo, Bolillo y Barrientos se lanzó al agogo, dijeron vas, vas barra vaya, vas, qué risa me das, vas, qué loco está ya, vas, agarre compa ya, vas, 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 llama barra vas.
Buen día, señor Sol. Muy buenas
Even a
tardes.
puppet show can't escape the reality of life in El Salvador.
Pues nuestro grupo de títeres.
Our group, they say, was directed by our beloved Roberto Franco, and it's thanks to him that we can give you a moment of happiness. Roberto's wife, Corina, has been looking for him for the last 3 weeks. She goes from one security force to another, hoping for some news. Journalists in San Salvador told us that the chances of her husband turning up in the jail we saw, where U.S. congressmen and press can visit, were very slim. Even as she searched, she knew that there are other jails, which the press never enters and from which few prisoners emerge. She was not the only one searching. There are many in the streets of El Salvador. They always go to the legal aid office at the archdiocese.
Buenos días, señorita.
Pase adelante, siéntese.
Gracias. Siéntese, mamá. Siéntese, mamá.
Señora, siéntese. Siéntese. ¿Qué tal? Aquí estamos. Mucho gusto. Siéntese.
Siempre preguntando, señorita, por mi hijo, ¿verdad?
We are here again about my son.
Es el doctor Alejandro Mira Cetino, sí.
It's been 7 months that he is gone.
Ya va a tener 7 meses el 26 de
I've looked for him everywhere and I can't find him.
He buscado por todas partes y no lo encuentro, ¿verdad?
Sí. Nosotros, señora, hemos
We have received the answer from the security forces that they don't have him. He's not there.
No lo encuentran, no está.
¿Cómo puede perderse una persona, señorita? Tan
How can a person get lost? A person as well known as my son.
Como una persona que se dedicaba únicamente a su trabajo.
My son was dedicated only to his work.
Él es pediatra.
And he is a pediatrician.
Yo lo he buscado por todas partes y no lo encuentro.
I've looked for him everywhere and I can't find him. I feel desperate. He has 3 children. The youngest doesn't even know him. The eldest child said to me, "No, Grandma, we don't want any presents. We want my father."
Queremos a mi papá.
La verdad es que la desesperación mía es por los niños, ¿verdad? Preguntan por él.
I'm desperate for the children. They ask for him. I would like to be stronger,
Quisiera hacerme fuerte, pero no puedo.
but I can't.
No entiendo por qué. No es solo él. Yo
It's
sé
not
que son
only
muchos
him.
visitando los
When you
lugares
go to the
humanitarios.
humanitarian organization, you realize that there's an enormous amount of people who disappear.
¿Por qué desaparece así la gente?
Why do they disappear? Colonel Nicolas Carranza is one of the most powerful men in El Salvador.
Where do they go, those people?
Well, it could happen. Maybe they go to the United States. We have found out many cases of people who seems to be disappeared, and he has gone to United States. Maybe some of them go to the guerrilla. Some of them may be retained as for an extortion, for example, or as maybe kidnapped. That's what I could say to you.
The only place to seek comfort is the church. Like the country, it is divided and it has suffered. But it still dares to speak up for the people.
El gobierno,
The government,
el ejército,
the army,
políticos,
the politicians.
más que calles y paredes limpias de propaganda, queremos un pueblo limpio de sangre.
More than streets clean of election propaganda, we want a nation clean of blood.
Deben penetrar con sinceridad y con valor.
Politicians must penetrate with sincerity and courage into the problems of the country.
Deben demostrar
They must show that they understand the causes of the war
la guerra y que están dispuestos a
and
poner
that they are ready to create the conditions
para la paz.
for peace. The church. For generations, the only one to have offered comfort to the people of El Salvador. For generations, it had to be enough. Lord have mercy, they sing. Lord have mercy on your people. For a generation now growing up in El Salvador, will the Lord's mercy be enough? This is a refugee camp. There are more than 300,000 displaced people in El Salvador. There are several camps in the capital.
Estamos así encerradas, pues, ¿verdad?
3 young girls, Rosenda, Yesiena, and Rubina.
Aquí lo sentimos como una cárcel, pues, ¿verdad?
We feel as if we were in jail
No tenemos
here
libertad, solamente este pedacito.
because we don't
pues.
have freedom.
Pues sí, lo sentimos muy
We feel very bad.
feo, pues, ¿verdad? Yo no me siento libre aquí porque
I don't feel free here because you can't go out.
el escuadrón
Outside there are the death
y nos
squads,
hacen desaparecidas.
and they grab you and they make you
Por
disappear.
muchas cosas no se siente libre.
There are many reasons why I don't feel free.
Hay quienes que ahí se vienen a poner, pues sí, de lo mismo es de la guardia. Ahí
They
en el
stand there at
portón.
the gate, the
Y
National
dicen de que
Guard,
se vienen a poner allí para vigilar quién
and they say that those who want to go out are subversive.
subversivos salen a hacer tareas.
Do you know what subversive is, I ask?
Pues yo creo que subversivos le llaman, pues, a uno que predique la verdad, pues.
I believe that a subversive they call someone who tells the truth,
Que defienda sus derechos que uno quiere
someone who
tener.
defends his
Porque
rights.
si uno ya no, pues sí, va a trabajar a una finca.
If someone goes to work on a farm, say,
a una hacienda. Entonces uno ahí lo tienen limitado.
And there they oppress him, and they don't give him food. And if he protests that he doesn't get enough money, they say that he's subversive, that he's against them. But the truth is that they want to oppress him. They don't want to give him food, and they don't want to give him enough money. And so they grow up with their dreams, locked up in what is half refugee camp, half jail. Over 1,000 people in a lot the size of a city block. Old people, children. There are very few men, mostly women and children. They are fed by the local church. The government regards them as families of guerrillas, or at least as sympathizers. And if they are not, they probably will be. Small families living in cubicles partitioned by rags. A generation growing up.
O sea, soy solo con un hermano nada más.
There's only me and my brother now.
Mi mamá ya la mataron.
They've killed my mother.
Ya va a tener 4 años.
4 years ago.
Sí, 4. Fueron casi de las
She was one of the
primeras que
first who
mataron.
they killed. Where's your father?
Ya lo mataron.
They've killed him. Who?
La guardia.
The National Guard. Why?
Allí no sabe por
You never
qué,
know
porque
why.
él comprando andaba
He was going shopping
lo agarraron
when they grabbed him
y lo hicieron desaparecer.
and they made him
Y
disappear.
hasta esta fecha no sabemos nada de él.
And your family?
Pues sí, mi mamá aquí está, pero mi papá,
My mother is here,
pues sí, era catequista.
but my father was a lay
Llegaron
preacher.
a matar ahí. Como ellos siempre celebraban la palabra de
He
Dios.
celebrated the words of the Lord. For them, that's a
Dios
crime.
ya decían que era delito. Entonces llegaron pues allí a matarlo.
So they came to kill
Nosotros
him.
no nos dábamos cuenta.
We didn't realize
Porque
it.
nosotros, mi mamá iba pues sí a comprar la comida.
My mother went to buy
Y
some
mi
food,
papá ahí estaba desayunando.
and my father was having breakfast.
Llegaron, rodearon la casa donde estaban.
They encircled the
Y
house.
mi papá pensó correr.
My father wanted to run,
Un poquito como de aquí a
and he
ese
ran
muro,
like from
corrió.
here to that
Cuando
wall
ahí lo mataron, pues porque
when they killed him.
como los
Because they
siguieron,
followed
y eran
him,
bastante,
and they grabbed
lo
him and they
agarraron y
killed
ahí
him.
lo-
Did you see it?
Sí, yo lo vi.
Yes, I saw it.
Sí.
Yes.
Yo lo vi pues porque nosotros, así cerquita.
We were standing
andábamos
nearby,
ahí,
full of fear.
pues sí, nosotros llenos de temor. Cuando nosotros lo fuimos a buscar,
When we went to
ahí
him,
estaba el puño de hombre.
there was a fistful of men,
Y ahí lo tenían, pues que ya lo habían.
and they had him, and they killed him.
Pues sí, se siente bien triste uno.
I
Pues,
feel sad.
porque, pues sí, ya no va a ser igual cuando estaba mi papá.
It will never be the same as
Porque
when my
así,
father was alive.
Ya, pues sí, nosotros ya no vamos a tener la educación que antes.
We'll never have the education we could have
Ya no
had.
vamos a tener la alimentación.
We'll never
bien.
eat well.
¿Quién va a trabajar por
Who will work for us?
¿Quién va a volver por nosotros?
Who will come back to us?
No se pongan tristes porque les he dicho que me
Do
voy,
not be sad that I shall
porque no
go,
los voy a dejar huérfanos.
because I shall not leave you orphans.
Ustedes mismos más de una vez y
You
habrán
yourself,
dado
says
cuenta
the
de que
Archbishop of El Salvador,
su práctica de la religión ha encontrado dificultades,
know that your practice of religion has met with difficulties,
interpretaciones,
with bad interpretations, sometimes with denunciations,
más de una vez
and more than sometimes,
persecución.
with persecutions.
María Candelaria recibe por esta señal el don del Espíritu Santo. Flor de María,
Today is the confirmation day.
señal, el don del Espíritu Santo. María Magdalena recibe por
Today
esta señal
they come of
el don
age.
del Espíritu Santo. Yesenia recibe por esta
Today
señal el
they
don
enter
del
the
Espíritu
adult
Santo.
world.
María Rosenda recibe por esta señal el don del Espíritu Santo. Don del Espíritu Santo. Ana Iris recibe por esta señal el don del Espíritu Santo.
It has been 5 weeks since Corina's husband has disappeared. We were about to leave El Salvador.
Me siento mal, terriblemente mal, imagínese usted.
I feel bad, very, very bad.
Tener un día martes, por así
On a
decirlo,
Tuesday,
tener
you
un
have a
hogar,
home,
unos hijos sanos,
children,
mi esposo que trabaja,
a husband who
y un
works,
día miércoles no tenerlo, no saber
and on a
dónde
Wednesday
está.
you don't have him.
Sentir, vivir esa impotencia de buscarlo en todas
To feel
partes
this
y no saber de él,
impotence,
no
to look for him
encontrar
everywhere,
rastro
not to find a
de
trace.
hacia dónde fue, qué se hizo,
Where has he
qué
gone?
fue de toda su vida anterior,
What
de
has
su
happened to the
trabajo, de
life he
sus
had?
hijos. Angustia, pensar
Anguish,
que puede haberle ocurrido algo malo,
to think that something bad could have happened to
estar en
him,
situación,
that he might be
no
in a
sé,
very bad situation,
sumamente mal, quizá enfermo,
sick,
preso,
prisoner,
no sé, incluso si muerto,
even
y
dead,
no tener siquiera
and not to have, how to say,
¿cómo decirlo? No tener siquiera la
not to have the
certeza de si está
certainty
con
that he is
vida
alive.
o no está con vida.
How do you feel without your father?
Triste,
Sad,
mucho.
very sad. Do you think that he will be back?
Sí, pienso que va a volver en algún momento.
Yes, I think he will come back. Where is he, do you think?
Por ahorita no sabemos nada.
For the moment, we don't know anything. What do you think?
Ahora me siento con temor.
Now I'm afraid for my children,
Nosotros,
for
pero
all of
siento
us.
el apoyo, la
But I feel
protección,
the
por así
protection of
decirlo,
you.
de ustedes que son prensa internacional.
You are the
La
international
opinión
press.
internacional tiene mucho peso acá.
The international opinion
para las
carries a lot of
personas
weight for the
que
people who
gobiernan,
govern here.
Pero luego ustedes se van, ustedes van a
But
estar
you are
acá solamente
leaving,
unos días
and
y
we
nosotros
stay.
nos quedamos acá, seguimos viviendo
We
esta
must go on
situación que
living like
atravesamos.
this.
Ustedes toman los datos,
You take down
elaboran, qué
facts.
sé yo, material periodístico,
You'll make
lo
some
proyectan en
journalistic
otras
project
partes,
out
pero
of
ustedes
it.
están acá trabajando un par de días y
But
se
you're
van.
working and you leave.
Nosotros seguimos viviendo acá, seguimos viviendo
And
el
we must
problema,
go on living here,
buscándolo.
looking for him. Are you afraid for your security?
Sí,
Yes.
sí la tengo.
Yes, I'm afraid.
Tengo temor.
I'm
Vivo un
afraid.
estado de nervios. Realmente,
I know that sometimes I look
bueno,
very
uno muchas
calm.
veces parece muy sereno, ¿no? Yo tengo dos hijos.
I have 2 children.
Uno de ellos se da cuenta en
One
el
of them
medio de las
already
cosas y no
realizes
puedo
what's
pasar llorando
happening.
todo el día.
And I can't
Eso
cry
me
all
deprime.
day. It depresses
No puedo
him.
vivir angustiada las 24
But at
horas del
night,
día,
a time
pero
of
realmente
solitude,
en las noches, en horas de soledad, dan deseos
I want to
hasta de
cry with
llorar,
the
de la
impotence, with the
impotencia,
rage
de la
of
rabia, de no saber a dónde correr, pues a dónde buscarlo.
not knowing where to turn, where to look for him.
Sí tengo temor.
Yes, I'm afraid. El Salvador means the Savior. Who can save his children?
Our crew couldn't help Corina. All they could do was alert the U.S. Embassy to her plight. She is still in hiding. There has been no word of her husband. But the larger question is, who will help the people of El Salvador? The leftist guerrillas are pledged to overthrow the present government. Their political solutions and their aims are unacceptable to the United States. The Salvadoran government that emerges from the elections will be dependent on the United States. But neither the Salvadoran government nor the U.S. can seem to stop the killing. The problem has been vividly illustrated in the case of Colonel Nicholas Carranza, who was in tonight's film. A former high-ranking Salvadoran military official recently charged Colonel Carranza was an employee of the CIA and also one of those responsible for the right-wing death squads. Carranza has denied the charge. Whatever the truth, the central dilemma for American policymakers remains. Is an all-out war against communism in Central America compatible with our concepts of democracy? Next week on Frontline, a story of very special young people, student athletes.
The game, basketball. The players, 2 All-American high school stars.
With Derek, this is grade A rating. They're saying he is a kid that we all should take. He's quick, he's big, he's strong, he's smart, he's a great kid.
Mooney was one of those kids who was misinformed and misdirected. He did not graduate with his class.
It's like heroin. It makes him dream of something that's not a reality.
The question, do we owe them an education in return for their performance?
We call the program Chasing the Basketball Dream. It is next week on Frontline. I'm Judy Woodruff.
For a transcript of this program, please send $4 to Frontline, Box 322, Boston, Massachusetts, 02134. Frontline is produced for the Documentary Consortium by WGBH Boston, which is solely responsible for its content. Major funding for Frontline was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding was provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide. For video cassette information about Frontline, write to PBS Video, Box 8092, Washington, D.C., 20024.